Day 930 of the Ukrainian war map, also known as the Russo-Ukrainian War. Juzzie here, and today is another update as I take a simplified and down-to-earth approach to some of the most important happenings on the ground in Ukraine. So starting off, we'll take a look at those Russian losses, as currently Russia sits on more than 627,000 military personnel losses, representing an additional 1,380 in the past day. Then as for Russian hardware losses, 1 tank, 19 APVs, and a relatively whopping 50 artillery. Then headed straight into the Russian map today, as Ukrainian drones continue to penetrate deep into Russian territory, including in regions such as Moscow, Bryansk, Kursk, Voronezh, Tula, Smolensk, Kaluga, and even the Crimean Peninsula, marking it as one of the largest one-way UAV drone sorties against Russia since the beginning of the war. These strikes are primarily targeting military infrastructure, including bases, oil refineries, ammunition depots, and naval assets, with a specific focus on Moscow, which has faced dozens of drone attacks, resulting in an explosion near 2 airports, resulting in the suspension of flights for the wider region. This image with the smoke plume was reportedly from the Zhukovsky airport in Moscow, and then even as far away as Orenburg. An oil pipeline was breached, causing a large blaze, noting that this location is roughly 1,300 kilometers away from Ukraine, which is close to the previously known upper limits for the AFU drone range. Although, no word on the cause of this event specifically, but the timing is certainly suspect. And so for these latest events, despite the scale of these incidents from today, Russian media outlets downplayed their significance, framing them as mere attempts rather than substantial threats. So the Kremlin cannot even properly acknowledge these events. It's really quite backwards, as they want to promote this image of safety and having everything under control, making for an environment where the state narratives have become so twisted that their responses become somewhat confusing. Also to that end, the Russian MOD stated that they shot down most of the 144 drones sent by Ukraine. Meanwhile, Russia's Bryansk Oblast governor said that they shot down 77 of their own. So half of the drones apparently went to Bryansk and the other half divided up between the rest of Russia. That just doesn't seem consistent or accurate. Now, interestingly, the wide-scale flurry of drones from Ukraine appears to have been a direct and almost instantaneous retaliatory attack, because mere hours earlier, Russia fired about 40 drones into Ukraine with 38 shot down, all of which appears to suggest that this is how Ukraine will communicate with Russia now, if or when Russia chooses to fire on Ukraine. Meaning, you strike at us, we'll strike back at you. Though it is the type of response that Ukraine promised would happen just a couple of weeks ago. So these latest events are really bringing the war home to Russia, in an environment where Ukraine is increasingly leveling up the playing field in attaining the same volume and range in drone strike capabilities. So it's quite the serious development. In the meanwhile, Moscow keeps smoking, and the impact of these events will get clearer within the hours and following day. Then headed direct to Kharkiv in the Ukrainian map, as Ukraine achieved a significant feat by shooting down a Russian Orlan-10 drone at an altitude exceeding 12,000 feet for the first time, with this challenging operation carried out by the AFU's Iron Brigade. The now long-time used Orlan-10 drone has been a vital asset for Russia, used for reconnaissance, artillery adjustment, and airstrikes, making this a notable victory for Ukraine's defense forces. Also for this region, but zooming right in, as Russia's red-hot go of an incursion, which started almost 3 months ago prior to Ukraine's Kursk incursion, leaves a lot to be desired, especially given that it's only about 100 kilometers or 60 miles as the crow flies to Ukraine's larger northwestern land gains. Thereby, these locations' proximities to one another allows for the direct comparison of strategic gains made by each side, which may have something to do with why the Russian MOD wasn't releasing updated maps on the northwestern Kursk front, because it's impossible not to compare these two regions' achievements side by side, making for an embarrassing situation militarily speaking for Russia. And yet, it should also be noted from a comparison standpoint that, at the point of Russia's initial incursion from Belgorod into Kharkiv on May 10, Right at that time, Ukraine was largely fighting with one hand tied behind their back as it relates to the usage of most Western supplied weapons not greenlit for use beyond the border for targeting military assets within Russia. It took a number of weeks for the necessary approvals to then use said weapons on military targets across the border, all of which comes down to meaning that this was giving the Russian military a clear advantage at the start of their cross-border operations. Just a squandered opportunity. But then to look at this Kharkiv front as it stands now, more specifically zooming in, there's still no shortage of activity, as most recently Ukrainian border guards stopped Russian army constructions in the Vovchansk direction via the use of mortars just a few hours ago. Then added to that, just a few days earlier, Ukraine liberated a small amount of land southeast of the Russian-held Hilboka positions. Then headed into the Donbas on the map to the Pokrovsk direction with two changes considered on this map. The first was 1 square kilometer of land gains by the Russian forces just northeast of the town of Novorodrivka, in the fields adjacent to the settlement. Then there was also a small extension northwest of Krasnorivka, where Russia continues to communicate through the map that they are looking to complete this land encirclement just above. Though given my former but higher expectations from the Russian military in this larger region, given their previous momentum, I just had to plot Russian gains on the map since the time of early August, when Russian activities started to ramp up on this map. So instead of me just saying there feels like a Russian plateau here, instead, simple data analytics do actually show that to be a fair characterization. Top of the bell curve, if you will. Of course, this graph output could change where Russia collapses Ukrainian positions east of Novelska, but nonetheless, there still remains a marked decrease in overall activity in this sector, as it appears that reinforcement brigades of the AFU on the eastern front lines are making an impact. Take for example right here, Ukrainian soldiers of the Bashkort company captured a Russian crew along with their BMP-3 infantry fighting vehicle during their operations in the Pokrovsk direction. Then to a few brief mentions on the map, because somewhere in the east we saw the result of FPV drone strikes on Russian equipment by one of the roads in the occupied parts of the Donetsk region. Highway to hell. Then to quickly add, also in the east, we saw the results of the work of a Ukrainian drone on a concealed buhanka. The Russian man from the video says that this is repairable. Okay, if you say so. Then headed to some news, as Sweden has announced a €400 million military aid package for Ukraine, including spare parts for Gripen jets, combat boats, anti-tank weapons, and ammunition, as revealed by the Swedish Defense Ministry. And you may have noticed the mentioning of the Gripen jets' spare parts, which is something that has never been pledged to Ukraine. However, Sweden is obtaining the Gripen jet spare parts to keep a number of their JAS-39 jets operational for potential future donations. Thinking ahead. Then to a quick bit of a Russian hardware update, because after testing their new modal monolith bulletproof vest, Russian soldiers discovered that all 5 bullets pierced the plate. Outraged by the poor quality, one soldier remarked that they would be vulnerable to even basic MG fire in combat. So I can't help but feel reminded by the past situation of the airsoft vests that Russian army personnel were literally receiving some time ago. Then headed across to a funny to round it all off for today, guys. So the Russian MOD knows no shame with their latest poster advertising contract services for the SMO, using a photo of a Ukrainian soldier holding a child from 2022. And so all I can say to this is, again, really? First it was the US Nimitz-class aircraft carrier on their marketing, then it was the fictional and futuristic military aircraft from the film Avatar, then it was the iconic US Marines of Iwo Jima in World War II, an exact copy in reverse with different coloring schemes. Then somewhere in the mix, it was Russia promoting traditional values with Bonnie and Clyde. Then also there was the flags and posters of valiant Russian soldiers with a twist, inserting the celebrities Johnny Depp, Ashton Kutcher, and even Jude Law, with the picture being ripped right out of the film Enemy at the Gates. And out of all of this, the scary thing is, I'm just getting started. Because there's a whole treasure trove of ridiculous fakery by Russia that extends far beyond just these examples. Surely the Russian graphic designers are trolling the Russian MOD in these cases. But to be fair, if you've seen the majority of Russian soldiers, they're not exactly a media piece worth replicating for a recruitment poster. So that's it for today, guys. I have a whole backlog of military mobilization blunders and funnies, so I'm sure to get through to those shortly for you guys. And yeah, thanks again for watching. Please comment and like. Thanks again for all of that support. I really do notice it, and I do hope to see all of you guys there in the next one. Cheers!